Civilized Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at movies to find the ancient themes behind our modern problems. And we're looking at a very interesting movie for our times, Network. Network is a movie that's largely dealing with media. And if you've been out from under your lockdown rock recently, you know that the media is playing perhaps a larger role in society than it ever has before. I've got a lot of things to say about the media. So we'll talk briefly about media, the media, social media, and all of these alternate realities and how they seem to be reversing the way we see the world, the way we interpret what is real, the way we interact with our world. And then we'll tidy up with a little bit of advice coming from both the Movie Network and me, which is turn it off. But we'll get into that shortly. First, we'll get into the word of the podcast.
The word of the podcast this episode is going to be something a little different. I'm going to do something a little different today, surprising you. Now, I had a word of the podcast. Adjust these headphones. I had a word of the podcast set up, but then I decided no one tells me what to do. The network executives can't control me. I'm do whatever I want. So instead of doing etymology for the word of the podcast, I wanted to bring to light a term that some people may have heard before, which is key demo or key demographic. The key demographic or target demographic is a term in commercial broadcasting that refers to the most desirable demographic group to a given advertiser. Key demographics vary by outlet, time of day, programming type, but they are generally composed of individuals who are younger and more affluent than the general public. Keep that in mind for a second. Skipping over this, in general, I think people tend to call the key demo 18 to 49-ish, somewhere around there. And then after that, you are dead to your corporate overlords. Unless you're like really focused in on you, trying to get you to buy things for either old people.
Are one of them.
Am I a corporate overlord? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying the olds.
Anyway, so it's important to understand this idea of key demo. I think that's important. And also to understand the concept of I just have this very paranoid vision of advertising and media, and I have always forever. I'm really against it.
That's not unusual. You're not alone in that.
No, that's not unusual. I think that it needs to be more widespread. I think my attitude of skepticism and fear of being targeted by advertisements should be more widespread. We can get into that later if we want. But anyway, word of the podcast, key demo. I also don't like it when people shorten things. I just want to briefly point this out. It bothers me. I'll tell you a little story about that. I told you the story before, I think.
Story of the podcast.
So I was in a Starbucks once, years ago. And the person in front of me said, they ordered their drink or whatever, and then the person said, "Do you want whip on that?" I told you this. Have I told you this story?
No.
I've told you this story before.
I know.
Do you want whip on that?
That should be immediate firing squad execution, in my opinion.
So, it's short for whipped cream.
I had no idea.
Right, but it really bothers me. It really bothers me. So, in the same sense, I'm not going to go into the story. There's a lot more to it. There was a conversation I still remember because I was scarred by the trauma of hearing this. There was a conversation about someone's like, "Oh, I like your hair." They told that to the barista, and there was something along the lines said of that must have taken a lot of work. And then I remember sitting there thinking to myself, growing your hair long is the least difficult thing to do in the world. And I remember thinking to myself, and I didn't say any of this out loud, I was like, dead people, their hair still grows. So literally you can be dead and your hair and fingernails still grow. So it must be, by definition, one of the most
Easy things to
easy,
do. In the world.
low effort. Now, to tend your hair, to make it look good in public, and nothing against this barista. Yeah. And her hair was nice and everything, and no problem. I get it. I understand, because as we talked about before, the man bun is, something that's been developing over the last year and a half. I understand that. But anyway.
You always bring it back to your hair somehow. It's interesting.
Is it?
It is interesting, because I think of the two of us, I have more hair, but you seem...
Not for long.
With the back,
that's not a threat. I'm just saying that I'm going to continue to grow my hair.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to grow my hair.
Well, listen, enough of your rants against the commonalities and the banalities of daily life.
Key demo.
Execute the barista. That is my key demo. Now, listen, I also find it offensive when words are dismembered for no good reason. That's the thing. Especially, I find the overuse of emojis as a shorthand for words. It's not good. It's making you dumb. Look, I'm sorry. It's making us dumb. But let's get back to the topic at hand here. So key demo is something to keep in mind when we're talking about the way media targets their audience. There's a change here. And network deals with a change in the role of media. You see this development from news as something objective, as something that provides information, to something more sensational, to something more of a product that is meant to grasp attention rather than inform. This is, we have to talk about this, because if we have, and here's the problem, right? Because you get to the answer, well, make it state-owned media. Remove profit from the equation so that the media isn't dependent on ratings and profit. Now,
what the fuck? No, what? Sorry, I just have to interject. That's the
I know it's wrong.
Solution that immediately comes to mind is, let's have the state own the media and then everything will work out. That doesn't make any sense.
No, please control yourself. I know that it doesn't make any sense, but this is the immediate argument that comes out, and that's why nothing ever gets fucking solved, because nonsense gets amended with more nonsense, as we see every day. The problem, as you are so eager to point out, is that then you have a whole host of other issues if you remove the idea of a profit incentivized media. But there is still a problem with the current media framework that seems almost kind of like a rabid, starving, mangy raccoon at this point, ready to grab onto any piece of rotting flesh and run with it. Like, the media is like a pack of diseased hyenas that are just desperate to take anything if it'll give them just a little longer on the savannah. And it's not good, because especially when you start to see any animal, any organism, when it gets desperate for survival, the choices made become riskier and riskier, shall we say. And I think our media landscape, the corporate media, which is rapidly starving and being starved, seems to be making worse and worse choices in how they're going to keep themselves afloat. The media just starts to get more and more sensational. And of course, you see alternate media pop up. And thank God for that, because that's why the idea of, we'll have state-sanctioned media to remove the profit issue is a flaw, because, then you have state-sanctioned information as a result. So in network, we see that development. We see that same problem play out with what happens when the media starts to get a little too hungry. What happens when choices start to be made that are no longer in line with the seeming goal of providing information? This is what's so weird about our media today. It went from a time I was pretty young when this was still around. Like, media has kind of become opinion dominated for the most part for a fairly long time now. I remember briefly NPR being respectable in 2014. Like, that's kind of, I think, around when media, liberal media especially, was still respectable, and you didn't call it liberal media. You knew, they kind of, lean left, whatever. But, like, it wasn't in this way of that, oh, well, I can't actually listen to that because I genuinely would have to do fact checking on the media, which is supposed to do the fact checking.
So there's a couple of different shifts. One is what you're trying to get at is that there was a change, and since I'm a little older, I remember it even better, that, and it's in this film, the quote is, quote, merely to add editorial comment to our news show. This was one of the quotes in the Film Network, and it was considered in the context of the film new, kind of a little new, Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at the overall picture, let's say, and especially within cable news, especially the majority of what is actually watched is not factual based news reports. It is usually a figurehead, right? So you have on the right people like Tucker Carlson, and you have on the left people like I don't know who's that, Joy Reid or Rachel Maddow. She quit, I think, or she's quitting or something. But anyway, the point is you have this figurehead, and they're telling you things that happened. But I mean, anyone can tell you something that happened, and then they're giving their opinion about it, and that's fine. There's a place for that. But that's replaced this idea of, oh, we're just reporting what happened and kind of leaving it, and it's never been perfect, but kind of leaving it to the viewer to discuss and decide. Yeah. Now, but the problem is, and the problem you see in this film, is that is popular. That's popular. People do like that to a degree.
Entertainment is popular. That's what you see as the pull in the film, is that it's this morphing from the providing of information into something that's more popular.
But now there's not just that. In terms of the economics of it, it's, and I'm not an expert on this, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's way cheaper to hire some person to make speeches and talk, right, than it is to actually hire reporters to go out on the ground and collect information and do anything even resembling investigative reporting, let alone just reporting in different places. This is something that CNN was known for early days, was actually getting people out there in multiple countries. One of the formative things about CNN for me is my age was coverage of the first Gulf War in the early 90s. Like the idea that you could see an American reporter stationed in Baghdad, like there was whether or not there was value to it or not. I'm sure there's a big discussion about all that, but things have changed. I mean, now we are also sitting here with cameras and microphones and headphones and our little pseudo studios, expounding. We are to some degree also part of the media landscape. We are creating media.
Like we are creating media.
We are,
but we're not. The problem here is the conflation, like this weird chimera with journalism and entertainment. That's the thing that's so new and so strange and so deceptive, because it's this morph. It's this joining of two things that are in some ways inherently opposed, because there's this fundamental quality to journalism, which is we're going to say something that's true, whether it's popular or not. Entertainment doesn't really do that. Entertainment's entire goal is to be popular. And this is a distinction between art also. Art's goal is not necessarily to be popular. Entertainment's goal is always to entertain. So it must be popular by definition. So it's a problem when you have these opposing incentives to be popular, but supposedly to be accurate, informative.
Well, there's no way. There's no solution to this. That's the thing. Some things don't have a good solution. And there is something that I didn't put in our show notes because I just happened to stumble upon it last night when I'm reading this book called The Sleepwalkers, which is about the beginning of World War I, which will create a library circus podcast that people will love to hear about. Now, there was something, though, that caught my attention about this, and it was talking about how the governments of Europe, which were primarily monarchies, and varied depending on how authoritarian they were, or how, let's say, centralized the power the monarch had. It was routine to use the press, this is the early 1900s, to seed stories for a variety of reasons. See, I think people don't understand, and this still occurs today. People don't understand it. Like, so the governments would use, in fact, all the governments besides the government of the UK had specialized departments whose sole purpose was to, it went as far as, literally some governments, I think the Italian government, simply just paid journalists straight up, here's the stories we want, here's the money, right? It was like that. And then there were also different ways of doing it. And the governments would use, and they do this today, I guarantee you, and it sounds like conspiracy theories, but here's the thing. So you'll trial balloon an idea by putting it in the media and seeing how the populace reacts to it. So, and then you're gauging public sentiment based on that, and then making your political decision based on how that works out. So the idea that I'm always, I never want to think there was, you hear this idea of like there was a golden age of media or something where you had America, had the three networks and the respectable newscaster who would sit there and just give you the facts, and then, yeah, probably somewhat, I guess. But, and I don't know, again, not an expert, but, how this has worked for a long, long time has never been as simple as, here's the facts, here's the story, decide for yourself. I don't think it's ever been that simple.
I might go so far as to say that if anything, this is a better media landscape because it allows for immediate dissent. It allows for the immediate uncovering of falsities in the legacy or corporate media. And it allows for many alternate perspectives. And so in a way, it has that free market competition quality where if your journalism or your network sucks because all you do is bang the same ideological drum and you are continually caught forcing a narrative or cutting out details that are important to the story or underplaying important stories because they don't fit a certain narrative, if your program or your network does that, you lose viewers. And you can lose those viewers now because they actually have somewhere else to go. So the other side of that coin is, well, now who's vetting all of these new voices and the chance for lower quality, less rigorous information coming out and being spread is increased. But at the same time, when you consider what you've just said about the history of governments using journalism and media to seed false stories or to test reactions, can we really even say that, there's more of a danger of misinformation now than there was in the past? At least now we have a better chance of debunking that misinformation from wherever it comes, because for the same reason that the corporate media gets found out every time they fumble a story, the average person, if they're on their YouTube channel spreading falsehoods, they're going to be found out just in the same way. Now, of course, you can say that, well, people are going to be more easily swayed by these falsehoods and whatever. Well, welcome to Earth. I mean, we've had the preachers, and the conmens and the cults ever since the dawn of time. So that's not going away unless you remove every option for people to speak to masses, which I don't think is worth doing. So I don't know. Let's go on now to a heavy section here, which is an idea.
I'm afraid I have to interject and briefly remind the audience that if they like this video, feel free to like it. And if they dislike this video, feel free to
Scream
understand
into the void.
that YouTube has removed the ability
Your
for you to
voice.
see how much you dislike a video. And so this, look, now who's in control? To some degree, it's the platforms. And I'm not going to go on and on about this because there's plenty of other people who talk about it.
Well, we are going to go on about this because that's the next
Are we?
section.
Very well, then
Yeah.
continue.
So one of the ideas that I had when I was watching this movie was how social media fits in to this idea of legacy media that the film is depicting. So in the movie, it's focusing on this older form of media. But I see a lot of parallels with the problems that are coming up in the movie with social media. So particularly, there's a few quotes here from the movie that are really apt for the same issues we see on social media. We deal in illusions. You're the real thing, not us. You eat like the tube. You raise your kids like the tube. You even think like the tube. And so tube being TV, but if you swap that for screen and you eat like the screen, you raise your kids like the screen, you even think like the screen. I think that this is pretty apt when you're talking about social media. What I think is very strange about this landscape we have, where we were warned about and we're paranoid about what TV would do to people, how it would change us. I don't think that change was as impactful as it might have been predicted to be. But what I do think is more impactful than we have even begun to realize is the ability to have a mini TV everywhere with us all the time. There was something about having the TV static, it stayed in a place that made it less damaging in a way than being able to have a screen with you every waking moment, everywhere you go. I think it's almost that it's the way that thing has a role in your life that makes it so detrimental. So now this idea that people would be so manipulated by the TV is vastly more real now that the screen is with them everywhere they go. I mean, and you see this, you see these fads that come up through social media. And one of the stranger things is the way social media hinders originality, because everybody's able to look at the same things across the world. And so it's almost like there's this worldwide culture that influences people. And it's no longer something that, cultures are differentiated by their location, by the separation that they have from the town over there. It's almost like we're all becoming this global culture because we're all able to access the same media, the same trends, whatever is going on. This is particularly interesting when it comes to women's beauty standards and social media, because that's
You want me to go ahead and jump in and talk about this because this is probably my area of expertise? Or did you want to continue with the women?
No,
women's
we'll
beauty
talk about man buns shortly, so you can jump in there and talk about how
Okay, great.
Instagram has influenced your choice in wearing a man bun and all that. Anyway, there's this phenomena called the Instagram face, which is makeup and aesthetic changes that make women all look the same. And it's this Instagram look. It's a very weird phenomena, but it's something that comes from having no borders, no boundaries between groups of people. Everybody's ingesting the same material, so everybody's being shifted in the same direction. Now, of course, this is not always the case because there's still, cultural uniqueness, and there's still different parts of the internet that you can go on, and there's your echo chambers that you can cultivate, and they can be different than what other people are ingesting. But nonetheless, it's this weird sense that there's, the online village idea.
There is one not problem with this, because I guess you're right about all this. But the idea that originality has been lost, I don't know that that's true, because I'm not sure that's really been a defining characteristic of humanity ever. And also, I mean, do you really think that this is curtailing people's originality? I don't know. I think it's just vaguely corralling people into the same products, which has always happened, whether it was television or newspapers. People, power centers set fashion trends, and then they're followed. And
yeah, but they weren't global. They didn't have global reach. So that's the thing, is that there's, whatever, a Kim Kardashian figure has global reach because of something like social media. And in the past, you had these smaller reaches. A single human, no matter how famous they were, it's very hard for them to reach and truly influence people all over the world with so much power. See, there's something about the ability to be there daily. You can look at some figure that you'll never meet, and you have no idea who they actually are. You can connect with them daily. That's very weird. That's very strange. That's very unprecedented. So there's something there in the way that this technology is particularly pervasive to our everyday lives that makes it more influential. And even still, I mean, of course, I know the idea that humans are not like naturally so original, but it's not even that. It's not just the individual human. I think there's a homogenizing effect to larger culture. Instead of having this kind of like think about the 60s and the 70s and around this time, even around the 80s. I don't know. I'm just going to focus on there for the purpose of this argument. But you had differentiation within the same country. You had a very markedly different culture, different way of speaking, different style, different music, different everything would come out of East Coast versus West Coast. And then you can go even from there. That's starting to fade. It's not so easy to see the difference between New York and LA now as it was in the 60s, I mean, these places had such distinct cultures compared to each other than they do now. And of course, they're so much more connected now. It's just not, things are not, even physically, perhaps, because I think maybe it's easier to travel, flight is cheaper, people have the ability to travel more, and travel is definitely before the pandemic, travel is definitely something that is more prevalent now. So there's just this layer of, and that's, aside from social media though, but I think that the internet, and more largely, like more impactfully, social media connects groups of people that otherwise wouldn't have such a strong and immediate connection, and that's why they influence each other, and it has this canceling out effect. Perhaps think New York, LA, they end up adopting both of each other's traits like that, and it homogenizes both. And maybe that's better, whatever. I'm not making so much of a value argument, but I do think there's something notable in how the edges of what makes something more unique have been softened and blurred through social media. Things seem to be more homogenized culturally.
Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. I remember, and viewers can check it out if they're interested, there was, after and around World War II in the UK, the BBC had rules, and they may still have rules, for how you're supposed to speak when broadcasting. I can't remember what it's called. It's called like it's not official English, but the British Standard English, something like that. So now you can go and you can find this stuff if you're interested in words, which I am. The way that dialects collapsed and homogenized in the UK is really interesting to see with the advent of mass media. Because if you lived in the north of England before that, you wouldn't know how people spoke in a certain neighborhood in London. So media has certainly had this effect for a long time. It isn't new to social media, but I do understand there's an aspect of it maybe because of how much people use it. Now, there is still, I assume, people like me who I remember years ago, you said something about Kim Kardashian. It's like, I don't know who that is. And then recently, a friend of mine said something about some person, Chris Williams or some shit. I don't know. It's some country music person. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I've never heard the name. I don't know. It's Chris something or another. I don't know. And so you can disconnect from things to a degree. And now you always scoff at this.
Because you're not an example of real people.
Okay, so here's the alternative. Okay, I understand that. I'm not an example of a real person. I understand that. Okay. Then your other alternative over here is to constantly stare at Instagram and become like whoever an Instagram influencer is. So make your decision and choose. Because that's what it comes down to. Where is this? What's this plan here? What's the plan?
Okay. There's a middle ground, first of all.
So we've located a potential problem.
Can we extreme of this? Like, you don't even know.
Well, is there can extremism sometimes, if it's nonviolent, be an okay thing? Can I be extreme as long as, I'm not saying violently oppose Instagram. I'm saying maybe just stop. Just stop.
I'm not opposed to your extremism. I think that's a fine choice for you. I'm just saying that I don't think that like it even has to be that far for it to be effective. But we'll get into the answer here shortly, because briefly, I want to touch upon something that is maybe the dark side of this effect, which is, so we have this idea that in network, the newscaster that's this kind of prophet figure, he has this line of argument in one of his I don't know,
tirades.
Yeah, where he says, "You're the real thing." And this is an interesting idea to consider. You're the real thing, not us. We deal in illusions. And so this is kind of the treatment of the media that I like to take, which is they are creating these narratives and framing things in whatever way they believe is going to get them the most traffic to their website, the most outrage to share an article, whatever it may be that they're seeking. And so there's this effort to create stories, to frame things in certain ways that will be lucrative to this, whatever the company is. Or even if you look at certain individuals that become this kind of like media personalities, there's also that same impetus to frame everything within a certain narrative that sells your brand as being against this or for this or whatnot. And people become these very two-dimensional figures. And it is almost like they are not real. And so there's something important to remember, especially when media now, having such a prevalent role in our lives, feels very much real. I'm sure it feels very much real when you have a series of people aggressively attacking you online. I'm sure that feels very real in your body. But at the same time, when you put the phone down, when you shut the TV off, when you turn off the news, you are the thing that's there, that's real. And there's some kind of power in recalling that. Because what I worry about is something that I see as kind of like the dark influencer effect, which is, so we have the light influencer, which is today we're doing the keto diet. Tomorrow we're doing yoga with goats. Fine. Seems harmless enough. But then you have the dark side of this, which is anti-vaxxers are everywhere. White supremacists are in your basement. There's an enemy for everything that's around you. Here's the newest enemy. Here's how to spot them. Here's how to fight them. That's the dark influencer effect. When you have this media, whether it's social media or the corporate media, that deals in creating stories and selling stories to get you engaged, to get your heart rate up, and they're telling you what's out there that you have to be worried about, what is out there that's dangerous to you next. That is something we have to completely divest from. The idea that we can be told what enemies we should be worried about through mediums that are primarily artificial and have been long trafficking in falsehoods and artifice and entertainment. Again, it's that blend of we're going to entertain you, but also we're going to tell you who's hiding in the bushes next. That's the thing that I see as a danger with the influence that these mediums of illusion wield.
All right. So I understand that when I suggested the idea of yoga with goats for the Silver Eye Society, that you said no to that. And I accept the fact that I can't have my way all the time for the podcast. And I'd just like to take a moment for viewers to lament the fact that I will no longer be developing. It was in development. That's what they call it in the industry. The concept of, goat yoga. If you're not going to listen to Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow or whoever influencers are to warn you of the dangers of the world, who will you listen to? Who did people listen to?
Nature.
Why? Okay, that's an answer. So there's that. I don't know. I don't feel that scared when people tell me things on the internet. I just don't usually.
Because you don't take it serious. Scared. Neither do I. I'm not scared of fucking
maybe a lot of
anti-vaxxers or whatever Satanists in the government and all these things. Because all these things have an air of such sensationalism. I think that if people really learn how to spot these things in a way, because it's so easy to buy, because these fucking stories, they're meant to get your shitty tribal animal brain going in the way it's gone for thousands and thousands of years. But if you know how that pattern works, then you spot it. You see it when, so here's the new enemy, and we're all lining up against this enemy today, and here's this very black and white framing that allows for no nuance. Is that the fact of the day? You can see the way these stories are so hollow. And I'm especially distrustful of anyone that wants to point out an enemy to me. That in and of itself is suspicious. And that's the difference, right, between this previous role of the news as being very objective, being very dry in how it delivered the facts. It told you, today, so-and-so was engaged in a shootout in such and such area. It did not say, and this is why we have to pass this legislation, because this is why this happened. And when this happens, it's a way that we can understand what the bigger problem out this country is that shows us that this is true. That's different. And that's that editorializing. That's that opinion casting upon the facts of an event. That's what deserves suspicion and scorn.
So let's just also point out that when I was talking about how governments would inject their message into media, let's just be honest. I mean, we all know, do we not all know, we all know, right?
We better.
That Fox News is the Republican thing, and the MSNBC and basically most everything else is the Democrat thing. So it's not exactly, that's what they're going to do because these people are politically partisan figureheads that talk. I expect it. It's okay. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because I don't take it that seriously. I like, and here's the thing. And any thinking person can turn on any of these networks. You already know what they're going to say. So there's no reason to be upset or offended. Just do what everyone is doing now. This show's over soon. The show's coming to an end. There's not going to be viewers for MSNBC and for Fox News. So it's all a bit they're not in the key demo. You see, the key demo for cable news is aging. It is. And even those people are putting it away and tired of it. So I'm not going to expend a great deal of effort talking about how silly so many of these people are because they're starting to just be the best thing about it all is they're starting to simply be irrelevant.
Yeah.
Now, what replaces them will have its own issues and be its own problems, I'm sure. I don't see some utopia of media landscape where all independent people will go out there and everything becomes great. What I actually see happening, and this may be for the best, is an extraordinarily fractured echo chamber environment where everybody just goes off into their own spots and hears what they want to hear, but then maybe they don't. But then in actual life, the real life where you have to go interact with human beings, which is what I've always said, most people don't go about doing common activities obsessed with political objectives of either party. They just go do things they do.
Yeah.
So I'm not really that worried. I'm not worried about misinformation. I'm not worried about conspiracy theorists. I'm not worried about politically, political messages based on networks. I'm just not that worried about it because there's dangers. There's no doubt. And as reading this book about the lead up to World War I, you can see how the media certainly has an effect on public opinion and also is a reflection of public opinion. There's danger in all of this. I understand. But I'm less worried about because look, I mean, for me, the vast majority of my time spent consuming media is now independent podcasts. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and it's a lot of people that are going that route.
I think
like and subscribe. That's what you're supposed to say.
Oh my God.
I'm
think
trying
you're
to
not
be a
supposed
corporate
to just
overlord.
Interject it randomly
Yes,
into
you
another
are.
person's sentence. Christ.
I want to be a corporate overlord, a media corporate overlord.
Silence. Here.
Never. My voice cannot be silenced.
I think that part of what still, if I had to get at it, I think part of what still riles people up about the disingenuous way corporate media presents things is that they're exploiting their history of prestige. There's a sense when you see that CNN logo or that NPR logo, not so much Fox because I don't have that in my memory, but I do remember a time when CNN felt very neutral to me. And now I see that, and when I see such disingenuous framing of things, there's something that it riles up in me that it feels, I guess it's that breakup. It's like a breakup with coming to terms with something that used to be one way, now very clearly being another way, while still trying to present itself as being what it once was. There's something about that fractured reality, that almost wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing that's still trying to wear the corpse of its own respectability while still undermining that respectability constantly. There's something so frustrating about watching that dynamic play out. And there is something to be said about the danger and the harm that's done by the the spreading of narratives and the constant beating down upon the populace and the public discourse with these tired, targeted narratives, particularly when you see these corporate media companies hammer away at the idea that everything is a race issue and everything is an identity issue and everything comes back to the evils of conservatives or something. There's something very despicable about that because it does poison the culture in some way. The hope is that people are moving away from it enough so that it truly becomes irrelevant. It becomes old man yelling at cloud. No one cares about his grievances because they're not tied to reality anymore, and we know that, so why would you get upset about it? But there is still an effect somehow. I think particularly online. I don't think people are watching like CNN, on TV, but I think these headlines come out, and since people are online so much, they still interact with those headlines, and those headlines are what is still causing rifts and toxicity within the cultural discourse, because it is really causing a regressive culture that is hyper focused on these pet causes that these companies seem to have.
Okay, so, and when we first started this podcast, we talked about what we were going to do and all this. And one of the things I said is I don't want to make it very based on the news of the day or of the week too much. Now, obviously, we do reference those things, so we have to because that's part of the broader cultural conversation. But what you just said, there's something to this. Now, you use Twitter, whereas I don't, and you use social media in general, I barely do. But what's happening now, I think, is that these companies are writing headlines in order to get shared, which means they need to write the most egregious thing, okay? And then people go on Twitter for some reason and start telling people about it, and then get mad at each other for a few minutes and then forget about it the next day. And then, now here's where we have responsibility. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go on here and do a podcast about being mad at Tucker Carlson or Don Lemon or whatever, because then that just, it gives power to it.
It keeps them alive.
It keeps it going. All right. And so if you don't, that's what I'm trying to get at, is that's where the power lays right now. Lays, who knows? That they can still get people whipped up by using Twitter and the headlines, but no one is actually sitting there and watching the full programs, as far as I know, for the most part. And if you did watch the full programs of any of these people, you would actually most likely, and I've watched both CNN and Fox News, you'll actually find more nuance within even the editorializing people like Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon. When you actually listen to their whole thing, oftentimes you'll see, and what you'll see, people on the left will take one sentence out of something that Tucker Carlson says and then twist it. And people on the right do the same thing with the CNN people, right? Mm-hmm. They really do this. That's the game. But you're all playing a game that, here's the reason I say turn it off, because it's boring. It's kind of boring. It's just a boring game. I'm not suggesting people turn this off and stop with it because it's going to make you a better person, because I don't really care that much. It's not it probably will, but I'm not a self-help guru online. So I can't tell you that not tweeting is going to make your life better. I'm simply saying it's rather boring, isn't it? There's a lot of other things you can do that are fun.
Like listen to the Silver
I
Eye
would
Society.
rather stand and just like and subscribe. I would rather just lightly butt my head against a wall over and over and over again than go on Twitter.
It's the same.
Because it's the same thing. So at least I would feel something.
Yeah, well,
You
here,
know?
listen, one of the things that sticks out to me about what you're saying, and this is what I think is so pernicious about corporate media's role in the culture right now, especially in these headlines things. Because, okay, so you say they take one line from whatever left or right media personality, and what happens with that? It's the same thing that happens with these like baity headlines that get put out, and the whole purpose is to piss you off, so you share it and you fight underneath it. But what people are actually doing is they're not even engaging with the idea of the article or the broadcast. What they're doing is taking that and using it to fight some imagined enemy in their head. So we take a headline, and I have felt the same propensity to do this, which is, here, see, this is why I'm right. This headline right here, this proves A, B, and C. So it's this weird monologue that we have with ourselves, and these shitty, like shit-mongering media companies are providing us these little tidbits that we can keep using to play this game with ourselves and say, see, this is why I'm right. These are my beliefs proven right here. We're just yelling into the void, and CNN and whatever, they're passing out tickets like, here, get back in line to yell at the void. We've got a lot more you can yell about. And there's a cycle here that is very dangerous, because it's not just yelling into the void. I advocate yelling into the void. I think that's healthier. I think that's maybe safer. It's the void. It can take everything. What is dangerous about this yelling into the cyber void is that it ends up having this effect of reinforcing our views without real world evidence. There seems to be this effect where we get this headline, we get this out of context video clip, and we rage at it, and it reinforces that belief. That's not even real world experience. That was made to do exactly what you're doing with it. So it's this weird partnership of bad impulses. It's like we have the desire to be worse, and then these media companies come along and say, here are the tools that you can use to be your worst self. And we say, thank you, and we take them, we keep going. And we kid to ourselves that, I'm being my best self because I'm showing why this thing is bad, or I'm showing why the ideas I have are going to get rid of this bad thing, whatever it is. I think that cycle is what's especially dangerous, because it starts to create this artificial world, and it seems like people create these artificial enemies in their head, like the anti-vaxxer or whatever. Like that one is, to me, particularly weird, because I've had people I know kind of be, against anti-vaxxers. It's just like, you don't realize how many of these boogeymen are part of your everyday life. And that's that distinction, right, between being in the real world and being in this online world where everyone is a 2D person and they're your villain or your ally. In the offline world, it's funny because I've actually had this sentiment, because things have become so polarized. And LA is the kind of city that forces you to conform, to comply, and it makes you choose sides. And, these kind of things like the mask mandates particularly are pernicious, because you don't even get to have a choice whether you're going to wear masks in a certain place. I totally respect that choice. But when you force people to make a choice, you're making it very obvious that it's a for or against situation. You inevitably create dissidence when you force things. And so it creates this rift. And so this city is a particularly strange cauldron boiling full of, this strife and divisiveness. And it feels very uncomfortable to be here. Of course, because I don't like the atmosphere. If I did, it wouldn't be so uncomfortable. I'm sure I'd be like, everybody's like me, I love it. But I've caught myself being out amongst the people and even having this impulse to be like, I wonder if they're wondering if I'm on their side or whatever, because these issues are becoming so all-encompassing, so at the forefront of people's minds of whether you're this villain or that villain. Did you support this verdict? Do you support this legislation? That is becoming so at the forefront of how people view the world that I even catch myself wondering if people are wondering about what side I am on when I'm out and about. And so we're in that's a little bit of a dangerous sentiment for me to be picking up on, because the only next step after that is that it actually is in the forefront, that we no longer have that kind of civility and anonymity about going around in daily life. Now you are having to kind of present yourself in daily life. If that becomes something where even as you go around the grocery store or you're going hiking in your neighborhood and there's this sense that you have to identify whether you're for or against, and that it becomes this topic of conversation that readily, that's not good. That's when the divisiveness reaches its peak, where it's like at that point, it's offline, which I feel like it's a danger that it would get there. So I don't know. That's what I see as the danger of this cycle of reinforcing this us versus them, this very lowest denominator type of thinking that the media contributes to, is that it's not only online. Eventually, it will affect the way we go about the world and interact with people offline. If you spend all your time thinking about these boogeymen online, eventually you're going to start looking for them in the real world.
I suppose that could be the case. I don't know. I'll leave it at that. I don't. First off, well, I have no. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm a more isolated person than you. I always have been, even before the pandemic. I also have always been fairly just like open about what I think, and it doesn't really matter to me if I'm in with the group or whatever at the time. And this has been the case everywhere I've lived. So I don't really foresee I don't foresee this boiling over except sporadically into actual problems, because I simply think that as long as the country is reasonably well off, what people are going to start like slap fighting each other in the Whole Foods in LA. I mean, come on, like it's a bit silly when you understand the real violence and history and deprivation of a lot of other places in the world. And to be honest, if people get that opposed to each other, to where that's what they end up doing, then they get what they deserve. I mean, I don't know. I get it. I live in Florida. Also, it's a different scenario.
Man.
I know that Los Angeles and particularly New York City are going through a lot of more restrictions and things. But I mean,
it's a terrible feeling.
But it's a feeling, right? Well,
you don't understand what I mean by it's a feeling. It's not like my heart is sad. It's an atmosphere.
I understand.
There's something about going out and like seeing people demonstrate their allegiance to this kind of narrative, I guess it is. Like, and this desire to live still in this state of absolute kind of panic. Like it looks like the pandemic just started here. Like, it's crazy. And then when I go back to Florida, I'm like, oh shit, what is going on over here? Like, people wear masks if they choose to there. I don't often see it. But it's a choice. And there's other parts of California that don't have the mandate though. Okay, so it's not only just all of California. It's actually like when I went a few hours, like an hour or two south of of LA, I couldn't believe it was like a completely different country. It's just like a normal place. And you would still see some people, you know, wearing masks. And it's not that I'm against that or anything. It's just that the enforcement, removing choice and whatever, seems to make things seem very it has this effect of making things seem very dire, you know, that
Sure.
you know what I mean, like you need to do this type of thing, and not just like, hey, assess for yourself your level of risk that you're comfortable with. That is always how we have lived. Assess for yourself what level of risk you're comfortable with. When there's this intervention,
No, it's not. That's not true. That isn't true. In fact, that's become less and less true over time in this country.
Well, I agree
and
that
other
it's
places.
become less and less true, but I don't agree that it's never been true.
I mean, if we're talking about like olden days where there were basically very little laws, but the idea of assess your own risk and do what you want. I mean, seatbelt laws. It's
Yes.
against the law not to wear a seatbelt, I guess, everywhere, right? Which I endorse, by the way. I mean, I endorse always wearing a seatbelt. That's my nice public service message for today. I actually do. Won't go into that story. But
Yeah, but seatbelt is not the level of intrusiveness that we're
it is
talking about.
absolutely
no,
so.
it's
You
not.
no, see, this is what's so funny about this. This is all it takes is time, and then everyone accepts something. So
How
look,
is
you're
a
being
seatbelt intrusive?
I'll explain it very simply. You're being told inside your own vehicle that you must use a safety device, and if you do not, you can be pulled over by the police, who is an armed policeman. God bless America. And they can write you a ticket, fining you and summoning you to a court of law to either pay that fine or not pay that fine.
I know.
That is
I know
the
how
exact
seatbelt laws work. Thank you. For
well,
the
but
rundown.
then why do you say
Because
why
it's
would
not
you say
in your body, or it does
it's
not.
literally a
cover
thing that
your
wraps around your
face.
body? So
No.
wait, it's seatbelts are the body face masks of yesteryear. I mean, what the fuck are you talking about? Stop trying
They don't
to.
like stop development. They don't stop your social development. Like they don't prevent deaf people from being able to interact with society.
Okay,
Like,
and I'm not trying to say.
they're
Look,
way.
I don't.
That's not the same. It's not the same.
Do you really want me to just go through and point out how many things are regulated for your safety? I mean, do we really need to do this? Like, there's plenty of things.
I
Do I
know
agree with
that
the
these
mask
things-
mandate of Los Angeles County, by the way? No, I do not. That's why I don't fucking live there, and I'm not ever going to live in a place like that. Because but you know what? The people there have, in theory, democratically elected their council members or whatever it is who have decided this is what they want. So they must want that. The majority of people must want that. Good. Have at it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing
they
that I'm
do
not.
seem to want it. So God bless them. You know, mask up forever. That's great.
However,
I mean,
so
this is no. I just don't agree with the idea that a seatbelt is more intrusive than a mask. Like
I didn't say it
what?
was more intrusive because that wasn't what you claimed. That
But you're saying
you
that
were
things
saying
have always been this intrusive in the role of government assessing risk for us.
there is. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying yes. I agree. It's at a height now for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not. If that.
It's almost
if that
like
was
a
the thing.
difference in culture, though, because
It's not though, because that's not how the world
it
works. No,
is,
it's
though,
not. No,
because listen.
it's not. It's a slide. It's a slide. Things don't. You don't just wake up
damn
one
it.
day
We're
and all of a
arguing at the
sudden.
different things. Okay, we're arguing about
No,
different
we're
things.
not.
No,
I'm
because
actually-
you're not listening. What I'm saying is that there's a difference. It's almost that the culture itself has shifted because there's an element of collectivist ideology that's required to make the mass assessment of risk the most important thing above personal freedom. And I think that's a shift that we're starting to see that makes this whole situation so uniquely odd.
It's not, and I understand that, but and this whole pandemic has caused this. It's like everyone woke up all of a sudden and was like, oh, wow, we really are very quick as populations to accept a bunch of arbitrary rules. And it's like, wow, everything just changed. No, it didn't. This has been happening for a long time. Your notion that we were all, before the pandemic, individuals who are out there and like, I will not conform to rules and regulations. It didn't snap and change. It's been going on forever, for a very long time, to some degree, for good outcomes. We're not all pioneer people out in the forest or whatever.
I want to be a pioneer person out in the forest.
There isn't a motherfucker in this country that could survive the pioneer lifestyle anymore.
That's our problem.
It's a moot point. It's not entirely a problem because it was a brutal, violent life, and everyone's child died when they were 2 years old from typhus. So there are good things.
Antifa should be sent to pioneer. And then that just get it out of the system of the country. Like, there's clearly a desire to pioneer once again, but like no one actually knows how to do it. So they're just throwing bricks at buildings and shit.
There's no desire to be a pioneer anymore.
You're wrong. I have one.
Okay, well, then I think that you should go into the forest and that you should
not in LA County. I have to wear
not
a mask.
in LA County. No, because people of LA County have spoken, and they want vaccine mandates and mask mandates and all that. So let them do whatever they're going to do. Okay, go off into the forest, learn the pioneer lifestyle. I would like you to get into wood carving. I would like you to do a wooden idol of a mask, and then ritualistically set it on fire with your new pagan forest spirit religion, which you'll need to develop, all right, to free yourself
I already have it. I got it from the Jung episode on synchronicity.
There you go.
Covered that.
So look, again, I understand that you're living in a different place than I do. I understand that you also...
Mentally and emotionally.
Absolutely, and I am perfectly fine with that.
I'm not.
This is because, I'm happy with where I am happy with the state of Florida, and I am happy with I feel like we finally made it, Florida.
It's your day in the sun, man. Florida has been, mocked and ridiculed forever since I remember. It was always about California, loser Florida, and of course, fucking the same year I leave Florida, suddenly Florida's getting all this attention. Florida's cool. God damn it.
And look, we have our Florida men for sure. I mean, not all of that is fake news. We certainly have our issues, but
some pioneering.
Look,
spirit
I don't know
there
what.
For sure.
Listen, I think that we'll conclude this episode. There's just I'm not going to say I have hope. I have a tolerance for a lack of hope. How about that? I think that we all should develop that, and and then move on. Yeah,
I think that's good.
I just don't see things as being that different. I get it. Things are scary, and people are wanting people to do things all the time in the hope that
he's
is he vaccinated? Because I'm not sure if you're fully safe unless he is. If he is.
All right, turn this fucking podcast off. Go into the woods. Take your fucking mask off and pioneer. Like and subscribe.
Actually, yes, thank you. Like and subscribe. Is that our Patreon or our patron?
No.
That's something I need to work out.
Our Patreon is where they go to join the Silver Eye Society and to join this ragtag group of perhaps half-assed dissidents. I don't know what's going on here. But then you become a patron. Venerable, honorable role in, creating a culture that's slightly better.
And I think that how ramshackle our advertising is should give everyone faith in the fact that if we're going to try to manipulate you through our media empire, rest assured we're doing an extremely poor job of it, so you're safe. Because at the end of an hour-long thing where I just start yelling at you about seatbelts and then ask you if your dog's vaccinated, that's when we do our advertisement. So, I think we're on the right track. I'm looking forward to 2022 or whatever. Can I say one more thing at the end of this? Since no one's listening anymore anyway. Actually, I'm not going to. We'll hold it off to another episode.
Why would you do that?
Because it's
the suspense. Tune in next time to see whatever the hell he was going to say. Bye.